When someone with avoidant tendencies feels sexually drawn to a woman, one of the strongest hidden desires they carry is the need for emotional safety without any sense of pressure. Attraction for them is not straightforward. It often comes with internal contradictions. They may feel the pull of desire, but at the same time, a deep instinct to protect themselves from vulnerability. Emotional safety in their world doesn't look like open heart-to-heart connection right away. Instead, it looks like being around her without feeling like they owe an explanation, a confession, or an immediate emotional response. They want the space to feel something without the fear of being cornered into expressing it. This is not because they don't care or don't feel deeply. In fact, avoidants can feel attraction intensely, but they're wired to guard themselves from emotional exposure. If the woman they're drawn to creates an environment where they can just be, no interrogation, no forced closeness, no sudden emotional demands, they feel safer leaning in. Subtlety is their comfort zone. They don't want to be asked, "What are we?" or "Do you like me?" They want to observe, experience, and slowly build trust in the background. Emotional safety also means she doesn't react with panic, clinginess, or accusations when they pull back momentarily. That pullback is not rejection, it's regulation. When they feel pressure to reveal too much too soon or to match someone else's pace, their walls shoot up automatically. But when she stays calm, grounded, and comfortable in herself, it signals to them that opening up won't cost them control. They pay attention to how she handles silence, pauses, and distance. Someone who doesn't panic when things aren't constantly verbalized becomes someone they can approach more freely. Emotional safety, to them, is not about sharing feelings. It's about not being forced to. It's about knowing that their attraction won't immediately trigger expectations. If they sense the woman can handle the slow burn without theatrics or urgency, their desire becomes less threatening to them. When they feel safe, they start to express interest in indirect ways, lingering eye contact, dry humor, acts of quiet help, or simply staying around longer than necessary. But they still need the reassurance that she won't use those signs against them. Emotional safety is her ability to receive their energy without overanalyzing or confronting them with labels. They want to feel that their attraction isn't a trap. The freedom to feel desire without being demanded to act on it is what eventually makes them act. When an avoidant person is sexually attracted to a woman, subtle validation becomes something they silently crave even if they would never admit it or openly seek it out. They don't want loud praise, exaggerated compliments, or anything that draws attention to the fact that they're invested. Instead, they look for tiny signals that confirm they're seen, desired, or appreciated without it turning into an emotional spotlight. Validation for them isn't about ego inflation. It's about reassurance that their interest won't lead to rejection, embarrassment, or unwanted exposure. They often appear self-contained, but underneath that exterior is a constant monitoring of risk. If she gives them low-pressure signs that she enjoys their presence, values their input, or notices them in a quiet way, they feel more at ease maintaining that attraction. They tend to be hyper-aware of how they come across, even if they act unbothered. So when the woman they're drawn to acknowledges something about them, a skill, a joke, an effort, a personal style choice, it hits deeper than it would for someone more secure. But it has to be done subtly. Overly direct praise or intense admiration triggers discomfort because it threatens to expose the emotional stakes. A simple, "I like how you think," or "you're good at that," or even attentive eye contact when they speak feeds the unspoken need for validation without crossing their boundaries. Their attraction often lives in the shadows of their behavior, brief but intentional messages, selective attention, quiet presence. And in return, they want cues that she's receptive, interested, and open, but not expecting too much. If she mirrors their reserved energy without making them feel chased or analyzed, it reassures them they're wanted on their terms. Even something as small as remembering something they said, laughing at their one-line joke, or asking their opinion in a group can give them a sense of affirmation. It signals that they matter without demanding that they perform emotionally. Avoidants also fear being misread or dismissed. So subtle confirmation that their presence is welcomed helps them stay engaged instead of disappearing. When she shows appreciation calmly and without strings, they feel more secure staying in the dynamic. They're not looking for public flattery or emotional exposure. They're looking for small moments that tell them they're not invisible. Once they pick up on that validation, their guard lowers just a bit. They may initiate more contact, stay longer in conversations, or show interest through practical gestures. It's those quiet forms of recognition, unforced, brief, and light, that make them feel safe enough to keep desiring rather than retreating back into emotional distance. When an avoidant person feels sexually attracted to a woman, one of the most important but least visible things they need is the freedom to process that attraction in their own space and at their own pace. Attraction, for them, isn't a smooth slide into connection. It's a quiet internal tug of war. They can feel desire, curiosity, and pull, but those feelings quickly collide with their instinct to self-protect. That's why space becomes essential, not as a rejection, but as a coping mechanism. They're not sorting out whether they're interested. They already know they are, but they need room to manage the vulnerability that comes with it. They don't want to be rushed into defining anything, proving anything, or responding to signals before they're mentally ready. If the woman they want is too quick to demand emotional clarity, constant communication, or escalating closeness, their nervous system responds with withdrawal. But if she gives them room to come forward on their own timeline, the attraction has space to grow instead of collapsing under pressure. Space allows them to observe, think, regulate emotions, and ensure they won't lose control of themselves in the dynamic. This doesn't mean they want to disappear or be ignored. In fact, they often stay quietly connected, liking a post, sending a short message, showing up in subtle ways, or hovering around without making a move. They're testing the environment. They want to feel that stepping closer won't result in demands or scrutiny. When they step back, they're not always losing interest. They're making sure they won't regret moving forward. The woman who doesn't panic when they take that pause becomes far more attractive to them. Her comfort with silence, gaps in communication, or casual pauses creates a sense of safety. It tells them the dynamic isn't a trap. Processing also means they replay interactions in their head in private. They think about how she responded, how she looked at them, what energy she gave off. They analyze without showing it. Even when they're physically distant, the attraction may still be active behind the scenes. They just don't want anyone hovering over their emotions. They want the security of knowing they can step back without punishment and step closer without interrogation. When space is respected, avoidants tend to return with more openness, sometimes in small increments, sometimes suddenly and intensely. They might initiate a conversation out of nowhere, offer a favor, make dry jokes, maintain eye contact longer than before, or linger physically in proximity. These are their ways of leaning back in after retreating to regulate. What they secretly hope is that she won't interpret their pauses as disinterest or chase them with questions. The freedom to come and go emotionally without judgment is the oxygen that keeps their attraction alive. For someone with avoidant tendencies, sexual attraction doesn't cancel out their need for control and predictability. It intensifies it. Attraction introduces risk, vulnerability, and uncertainty, all of which make them instinctively tighten their grip on their emotional environment. Control in their world isn't about domination or manipulation. It's about preventing emotional chaos. When they're drawn to a woman, they secretly hope she won't push the connection into unpredictable territory. They want to feel like they can engage without being swept into conversations or expectations they didn't agree to. Predictability is soothing to them. It allows them to remain present without their defenses spiking. If she communicates in a steady, calm, and consistent way, they're more likely to stay engaged. They're hyper, sensitive to sudden emotional shifts, surprise confrontations, or changes in tone that suggest risk or escalation. If the woman is unpredictable, hot one day, demanding the next, emotionally intense without warning, they feel trapped and their instinct is to withdraw. They prefer interactions that don't force them to react emotionally on the spot. Control also shows up in how they choose to reveal attraction. They might initiate contact, but in small doses. They might flirt, but in ways that allow them an exit if they start to feel exposed. They may give attention for a moment and then pull away, not because they're playing games, but because they're regulating how much closeness they can handle without losing stability. What they secretly want is for her to allow that rhythm without trying to speed it up or define it too soon. They also value control over how much of themselves is visible. An avoidant person rarely wants someone to read into their every word or gesture. If she interprets their actions in a way that pressures them to confirm interest, it can trigger defensiveness. But if she allows those moments to exist without overanalyzing or demanding clarity, they feel safer revealing more. They want to be able to express desire in indirect or nonverbal ways without being put on the spot. Even in physical attraction, they prefer cues that are low, pressure, and manageable. If she creates an atmosphere where things can unfold naturally, without sudden escalation or dramatic energy, they relax. Predictability isn't about boredom, it's about emotional security. If they know how she'll react, what pace she moves at, and that she won't try to take control away from them, they're far more likely to act on their desire. The moment unpredictability threatens their sense of autonomy, they'll retreat, not because the attraction fades, but because control matters more to their nervous system than impulse. When an avoidant person feels sexually attracted to a woman, they won't usually express it through bold gestures or openly flirtatious behavior. Instead, they look for and respond to low-key physical or intimate cues, signals that invite closeness without confrontation. These cues act like quiet permission slips, letting them know they can move closer without being pushed into emotional exposure. They don't want exaggerated touch, direct seduction, or overt advances that put them on the spot. What they secretly hope for are subtle indicators, a gentle brush of the hand, playful eye contact, a soft laugh at something they said, a slight lean in during conversation. These are small enough to feel safe, but meaningful enough to spark internal assurance. They are especially sensitive observers. Even if they appear detached or casual, they're scanning for those understated signs that show interest without labeling it. A woman who can communicate attraction through presence rather than pressure becomes far more magnetic to them. Physical proximity matters, sitting closer than necessary, keeping the door open for private moments, or simply not pulling away when they linger nearby. To someone avoidant, these signals feel non-threatening yet validating. They don't have to explain themselves, and they don't risk rejection through direct pursuit. Touch, when it happens, needs to feel natural and unforced. Something like handing them something and letting your fingers slightly touch, or laughing and lightly tapping their arm, can mean far more to them than an exaggerated advance. The intimacy doesn't even have to be physical. Tone of voice, softness in expression, and warmth in the way she looks at them can create a sense of closeness without verbal acknowledgement. What they fear is being called out for wanting connection. So if the cues are subtle enough that nothing has to be stated, they're able to stay engaged. They also tend to give low, key signals of their own when they're drawn to someone. They might stand a bit closer than usual, find excuses to be near, or make dry jokes just to keep a moment going. If she picks up on these cues without spotlighting them or teasing too hard, it reassures them that she recognizes the attraction without exploiting it. The dance has to feel discreet. If she reacts in a calm, receptive way, smiling, slightly mirroring their energy, keeping the interaction relaxed, they feel invited rather than threatened. Avoidants often fear misinterpretation or being cornered by assumptions, so subtle intimacy is the middle ground where desire can exist without obligation. They secretly want these understated openings because it gives them room to act on attraction without sacrificing their emotional armor. When she communicates interest through quiet warmth instead of dramatic moves, they don't feel trapped. They feel tempted. When an avoidant person is sexually attracted to a woman, one of their deepest unspoken wishes is that she won't expose, label, or call out their interest. Attraction makes them feel seen in a way that can feel both magnetic and dangerous. They don't want someone to point out their lingering stares, their sudden attentiveness, or the rare moments they open up. Being made aware that their attraction is noticeable threatens their sense of emotional safety. They function best when they can feel desire in silence without being put in a position where they have to confirm, define, or explain it. They're not comfortable being teased about liking someone, asked pointed questions, or dragged into conversations about what they're feeling. Even light comments like, "You like me, don't you?" or "Why are you acting nervous?" can trigger their defenses instantly. They don't want to be cornered into acknowledging emotions they're still trying to regulate. The minute they sense someone is trying to extract a confession, they retreat, not because the attraction fades, but because exposure feels like a loss of control. Instead, what they secretly hope for is a kind of unspoken understanding. They want her to pick up on the signs without turning them into a conversation. If she notices how they look at her, how they linger around, or how their tone softens, but chooses not to announce it, they feel more comfortable staying close. Silence becomes a form of respect. It tells them they're free to feel something without being pressured to declare it. They also fear misunderstandings that lead to assumptions. If she labels the connection too early, calling it love, interest, chemistry, or potential, it can create a narrative they're not ready to step into. They want the freedom to explore attraction privately, piece by piece, without anyone building stories around it. Even if they're giving clear signals, they still want the option to deny, downplay, or redirect if they start to feel overwhelmed. What they value most is subtle cooperation. If she responds to their attention without calling attention to it, they feel safer moving closer. If she lets a charged moment stay unspoken instead of dissecting it, they don't feel the need to run. If she senses their interest but doesn't force it into words, the attraction grows instead of shutting down. Avoidants aren't scared of feeling, they're scared of being seen feeling. They want the privacy to be attracted without the spotlight of expectation. When a woman gives them that space, acknowledging interest through energy, not interrogation, they relax into the connection rather than escaping it. Their desire thrives in the shadows, and what they want most is someone who won't drag it into the light before they're ready.